The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Wednesday, March 4th, 2026. Your readers today are
Larry Beenan
and Linda Ranella, starting with the weather report. Mostly cloudy today, a high of 48. Overcast tonight, low of 34. Periods of rain tomorrow, a high of 45 and a low of 37. For Friday, low clouds, a high of 50, low of 43. Saturday, cloudy, warmer, afternoon rain, a high of 67 and low of 39. Sunday, cooler, becoming breezy, high of 48, low of 43. For Monday, sunshine and some clouds, a high of 54, low of 41. And for Tuesday, sunshine and a few clouds, high of 60, low of 56. Sunrise today was at 6:47 a.m. and sunset tonight is at 6:08 p.m. Larry?
Thank you, Linda. Our opening story: will gas prices skyrocket due to conflict in Middle East? Analysts say consumers could expect to pay more at the pump. Gasoline prices in Buffalo are holding steady despite the escalation of the conflict between U.S. and Iran that began heightening over the weekend, but those prices may be going up very soon. The national average price for a gallon of gas already increased over 11 cents between Monday and Tuesday as oil prices surged by 11% since Friday as tensions escalated in the Middle East. Average gasoline prices are likely to continue facing upward pressure as markets navigate the evolving geopolitical landscape, says Patrick DeHaan, head of petroleum analysis at the fuel technology platform GasBuddy. That includes the possibility of heightened attacks and strikes by both sides and disrupted tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow mouth of the Persian Gulf where a fifth of all oil traded passes. Prices are also expected to increase due to the seasonal shift to more expensive summer blend gasoline and the expected increase in demand during spring break season, according to the AAA Western New York and Central New York Council. In Buffalo, the average price of gasoline increased to nearly $3.08 per gallon as of Tuesday, AAA noted. That is up about 1.5 cents from Monday. The national average price of gasoline had been climbing for 4 weeks, but the most significant jump occurred in one day, with prices going from $2.99 per gallon on Monday to $3.11 on Tuesday. It's the first time this year that the national average reached the $3 per gallon mark. Markets will now begin reacting to this weekend's U.S.-Iran attacks, which have elevated geopolitical risk premiums even in the absence of immediate supply disruption, DeHaan said in a statement. Oil prices have firmed as prices assess the potential for further escalation, and while fundamentals such as inventories and refinery activity remain important anchors. The risk of broader instability, particularly involving key transit routes, has injected fresh uncertainty into energy markets, he said. Gasoline prices in Buffalo just started creeping up following the U.S. and Israeli beginning attacks on key Iranian leadership and nuclear, military, and intelligence infrastructure over the weekend. A larger local price spike is likely coming as the conflict with Iran could disrupt global oil exports. The widening war in Iran has halted tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, which connects the Persian Gulf to open waters, causing a major disruption in the global energy supply. The U.S. doesn't import oil from Iran, but other large countries that the U.S. deals with do. Gas prices locally had been a good place. As of Monday, prices in Buffalo had fallen almost 1 cent per gallon in the last week, and averaging to $3.06, according to AAA. It was at $3.10 per gallon at this time last year. That's the lowest average price at this time of year since 2021, according to GasBuddy survey of 472 stations in Buffalo. The U.S.-Israeli military strikes on Iran could disrupt oil exports and cause prices to spike as Iran plays a significant role in global crude oil supply, AAA Western and Central New York said in a statement. While the U.S. does not import Iranian oil, major buyers like China and India do. If the Strait of Hormuz is blocked, it could tighten global supply and impact prices worldwide, including domestically. Overall, oil prices have increased from the mid-$60 per barrel range into the mid-$70 per barrel range since the conflict began over the weekend. Prices of oil have direct impact on gas prices since about 60% of what consumers pay at the pump is in direct correlation to the price of crude, AAA notes. As of Monday, the national average of price of gasoline had already risen 5.6 price per gallon over 1 week and 7.8 cents per gallon from a month ago, according to Gas Bunny data compiled from more than 11 million weekly gas price reports covering over 150 gas stations across the country. The national average price then jumped 11 cents overnight. The last time the U.S. saw a similar jump was at the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine conflict in March 2020. Spring weather may be weeks away in much of the country, but the seasonal rise in gas prices is underway, AAA notes. Refineries are beginning production of summer blend gasoline, which contains pricier additives to reduce evaporation during warmer months. Gas demand is also expected to increase this month as spring break season kicks off and more drivers take road trips. It's hard to predict how high bump prices will go, but they always increase in the spring, said a AAA spokesperson. Consumers should consider removing heavy items from their cars. Some drivers put sandbags in their vehicles in the winter. The lighter the load, the less fuel you'll use. Also, cruise control will help you get the best mileage while grocery store discounts offer savings at the pump.
Thank you, Larry. Climate law goals to curb emissions face delay in state. Doreen M. Harris called it a reachable goal. As Governor Kathy Hochul's top energy official, she had been involved in the state's requirement for an emissions-free electric grid by 2040. Under the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act that former Governor Andrew Cuomo signed into law in 2019, the state needed to reduce its emissions by 40% by 2030 and 85% by 2050. Certainly, when we look at 2030, the goals in the climate law for 2030, we do see them as feasible. Harris, the president and chief executive officer of the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, testified at a state budget hearing on February 14, 2023. 3 years later, neither Harris nor Hochul is calling the goals of the CLCPA feasible without grave financial implications to consumers. Torn between the cost of addressing climate change versus the cost of more inflation on New Yorkers' wallets, the latter concern is carrying more weight in 2026. Hochul, who made affordability the theme of her last two budgets, mentioned climate change once in her State of the State address in January. Now the possible delay of the Climate Act's goals could be part of negotiations for the state budget, which is due April 1st. What I'm trying to do is just sound the alarm right now. I want people to know what the impact of the continuation of this law, and it's going to be a robust conversation, Hochul told reporters Monday in Amherst. I've already alerted the leaders that this is something we need to educate people about. If people understood the effects of this, I think the legislature would be very willing to have these conversations about how to make adjustments. On Friday, when asked if it would be accurate to say Hochul supports pushing back CLCPA targets, Blake Washington, Hochul's budget director, said it would be accurate to say that the governor will protect New York State taxpayers from price shocks at any cost. On Thursday, a memo from Harris to Jackie Bray, the governor's director of state operations, estimated that if the state did not roll back the timelines under the Climate Act, it would likely cost upgrade two-car households that rely on heating oil annual costs exceeding $4,100. Harris's memo followed the state's appeal of a state court decision that ordered the state to enact rules and regulations for compliance of the Climate Act by February 6th. Environmental groups, including Push Buffalo, sued the state, alleging that it failed to abide by the 2019 law. On Monday, Hochul's remarks reflected Harris's memo. Whether it's a family upstate who has one or two vehicles in the driveway and getting warmed in the winter by home heating oil, these costs are going to go upward of $4,000 per year, Hochul said. So on top of that, now we have the Trump war in Iran that is going to increase the cost of energy from that as well. So for businesses suffering from the already high energy costs and tariffs, it's cataclysmic. The same for families. That is why I am laser focused on doing everything I can to drive down costs and to try and get money returned to New Yorkers who've been overpaying. Josh Veronica, Director of Government Affairs for the Buffalo Niagara Partnership, the region's Chamber of Commerce, echoed Hochul's concerns. The data substantiates our concerns from the beginning that the CLCPA would make heating our homes, running businesses, and driving to work painfully unaffordable, he said. The BNP appreciates that the state is taking an honest look at how the CLCPA impacts our economy. This data cannot be ignored. It's time for a complete course correction on the CLCPA to ensure these estimates do not become our reality. On Tuesday, Blair Horner, Senior Policy Advisor at New York Public Interest Research Group, questioned why Hochul did not raise concerns over the Climate Act target dates in her executive budget proposal released in January or her recent 30-day amendments to it. And the administration's concerns, he noted, surfaced after state lawmakers concluded their hearings on the budget. Albany's muscle memory often is to kick things into the secrecy of budget negotiations, Horner told reporters during a virtual news conference. We've all seen it, we know what happens, but this issue is too consequential. The stakes are too high for New York to be considering it in the darkness around budget negotiations. If the governor wants to present her numbers, let's do it in public and let's have a real debate over what it is that she's proposing. Senator Peter Harckham, Democrat, South Salem, who chairs the state's Environmental Conservation Committee and appeared at the virtual news conference, was not ready to walk away from target dates. Harckham said 1.3 million utility customer accounts are in arrears in New York, but said it has nothing to do with the Climate Act and everything to do with the cost of natural gas. He said that 95% of the world and even the oil petro state of Texas are moving to less expensive renewable energy sources instead of fossil fuels. If we want to be serious about addressing utility rates and giving relief to our ratepayers and our taxpayers, we need to double down on our clean energy goals, Harkman said. We need to push forward with wind, solar, and battery storage, and that is what is going to provide us with resiliency, address our climate goals, and lower prices at the same time. Clark Gawker, Senior Director of the Movement Building for Push Buffalo, highlighted extreme weather events such as the fatal Christmas blizzard of 2022 in Buffalo, as well as extreme heat days expected over the next 20 to 30 years. So any backsliding or unwinding of the climate law goals we see as really the wrong move at this time and threaten the health, the safety, and the resiliency of our communities, Gawker said. In Western New York, lawmakers offered mixed perspectives. Assemblymember William Conrad, Democrat of Tonawanda, who sits on the Assembly's Environmental Conservation Committee, said the state needs to transition away from fossil fuels, but added we won't be able to do this successfully without honest political policy making. And right now I do believe that means a reconsideration and readjustment of the CLCPA's mandates. State Minority Leader Robert Ort, Republican of North Tonawanda, said the NYSERDA memo confirmed his conference's long-standing opposition to the 2019 law. The CLCPA is unrealistic, unattainable, and completely unaffordable for New Yorkers, he said. If New Yorkers think they are struggling with utility bills now, wait until they are forced to pay more than $5 per gallon at the pump and an additional $4,000 per year to heat their homes. Hochul administration officials have highlighted the pandemic, President Trump's roadblocks to offshore wind permits, and subsidies for solar projects, as well as tariffs that drove up construction costs among the new factors affecting the timeline to meet the CLCPA goals. On Monday, Hochul stressed that nobody saw these roadblocks ahead in 2019. I just need a reality check right now, she said. All these forces and how we get through them, but maintain true to the ultimate objectives of the law passed in 2019. Larry?
Thank you, Linda. Concerns spur state to cancel funding for Save the Michaels. The state agency that oversees addiction services is planning to cease millions of dollars in funding for Save the Michaels of the World Incorporated, a Buffalo-based nonprofit that has been operating in Western New York for 15 years, but has recently come under fire due to claims of fiscal mismanagement. The State Office of Addiction Services and Supports, OASAS, said it had previously identified serious fiscal and operational challenges at Save the Michaels that informed ongoing oversight and planning discussions. OASAS said it provided Save the Michaels with a 30-day notice that it plans to discontinue funding on March 29th, a decision that Save the Michaels is appealing. When conducting a site visit last week, OASAS attempted to collect additional information from Save the Michaels and was denied access to that information, OASAS said in a statement late Monday. OASAS is working closely with the county and local partners to ensure individuals receiving services are supported through a careful and coordinated transition. The two multi-year contracts being canceled are worth more than $5 million and call for providing chemical dependency services and non-medical transportation, an OASAS spokesperson confirmed. While those contracts are underway and some of the money has been spent, the loss of OASAS contracts is a significant blow to Save the Michaels and its ability to operate. Save the Michaels shared on its Facebook page Saturday that it's found out Friday that OASAS had chosen to end its contracts as a result of the state's decision, which Save the Michaels said came without any notice. The organization said it is no longer able to provide peer support services, drop-in support services, transportation to treatment, linkage to care for individuals seeking recovery, and support to families navigating addiction. In Lockport, Recovery Center, which opened in 2019, has at least temporarily closed since that announcement. We have fully cooperated with all requests from government, Save the Michaels said. We have new leadership in place. Despite this, our contracts are being terminated. The new leadership is not being given any chance to move forward. To discontinue working with grassroots agencies that has made a measurable impact on this community for over a decade should concern everyone, not just us, but especially the individuals and families who rely on these services every single day. Save the Michaels' troubles were documented in an article last week by Investigative Post, which reported that Save the Michaels would lose its Erie County funding after an OAS audit finalized the 2024 found fiscal mismanagement. Among the audit's findings, advances totaling nearly $40,000 were made from the organization to longtime CEO Avi Israel in 2021 and 2022 without prior board approval. Prior approval requirements were not being followed for out-of-state travel, and the board approved a $25,000 raise for Israel in January 2024 without OASAS regional office support or approval required for OASAS-funded providers. Sarah Bonk, the Erie County's mental health commissioner, said the counties, through OASAS's instruction, had been contracted with Save the Michaels for 3 programs, $425,000 for a case management program and more than $100,000 each for family support navigator program and a court navigation program. But the county made what Bonk called a really hard decision to send a letter to Save the Michaels on February 19th informing the provider that the county would be not contracting with the organization this year. In the course of the last year, there's been a continuation of historical concerns that we had related to reporting on time, fiscal governance, and oversight, and some of the board communications, Bonk said Tuesday. And then there were some additional conversations that had just alerted us to some concerns in terms of their advance. Israel, who founded Save the Michaels in 2011 with his wife Julie Israel in late December, posted on Facebook that he would retire on January 1st. Jessica Goff, who joined Save the Michaels in 2019 as an administrative assistant and then advanced into leadership roles, was elevated into the role of CEO after Israel's resignation. Save the Michaels responds. Goff said in an email at 7:35 a.m. Tuesday to OASAS Commissioner Dr. Shenanzo Cunningham and to representatives of Governor Kathy Hochul repealing the state with Save the Michaels and its new leadership team to stabilize, reform, and strengthen the organization rather than dismantling it. If the concern is governance, then govern. Goff said in the letter that Save the Michaels met in November with OASAS in Erie County to address concerns. Officials were informed prior leadership would step down in January 1st. Goff wrote. In addition, Goff said that Save the Michaels responded to the 2024 audit findings, but at no point was told that its correction actions were insufficient. There has been no fraud, Goff wrote. There has been no personal enrichment. There has been no criminal referral because none is warranted. There has only been a small community-based organization linking individuals to treatment within 24 to 48 hours, answering approximately 50,000 calls annually and serving individuals who do not walk through the doors of larger systems. Bonk confirmed a meeting occurred in late fall with Save the Michaels, recalling that officials gave the provider a message that things needed to improve. Goff said that Save the Michaels has outsourced accounting, strengthened fiscal controls, reduced staff to bare-bones operations, fully cooperating with OASAS. The financial hit. The two OASAS contracts being canceled represent a significant hit to Save the Michaels. Save the Michaels also has an OASAS contract for non-medical transportation. In that $1.2 million contract, which started in January 1st, 2024 and runs through December 31st, 2028, $540,000 has been sent to date, according to Open Book New York. In addition to those contracts being canceled, Save the Michaels has a multi-year $750,000 contract for a new syringe exchange program, but that contract, of which $183,000 has been spent, runs through the state health department rather than an OASAS. The organization in 2024 reported government grants of about $2,675,000, or roughly two-thirds of its total revenue. Save the Michaels was founded in June 2011 to bring attention to the awareness of the effect of opioids after the death by suicide of the 20-year-old Michael David Israel, the son of Evie and Julie Israel. We have answered tens of thousands of calls and helped save thousands enter treatment. With the temporary closure of Save the Michaels location at 144 Main Street in Lockport, the Mental Health Association in Niagara County said anyone who is using services from that office can contact peer support specialists to help them through the transition at 716-433-3780. Need that repeated? Call the station 821-5555 in the 716.
Thank you, Larry. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time is 9:22. A short story here. This is Today in History. On this date, in 1789, the Constitution of the United States took effect as the first federal Congress met in New York. In 1801, Thomas Jefferson became the first president to be inaugurated in Washington, D.C. In 1865, President Abraham Lincoln was inaugurated for his second term, with the end of the Civil War in sight in just 6 weeks before his assassination. In 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt was inaugurated for his first term as president. He was the last U.S. president to be inaugurated on this date. Subsequent inaugurals have been held on January 20th. In his inaugural speech, Roosevelt stated, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." In 1966, John Lennon of the Beatles was quoted in the London Evening Standard as saying, "We're more popular than Jesus now," a comment that caused an angry backlash in the United States. In 1987, President Ronald Reagan addressed the nation on the Iran-Contra affair, acknowledging that his overtures to Iran had deteriorated into an arms for hostages deal. In 2015, the Justice Department declared Darren Wilson, a white former Ferguson, Missouri police officer, in the fatal shooting of Michael Brown, a black 18-year-old, but also issued a scathing report calling for sweeping changes in city law enforcement practices. Larry?
Thank you, Linda. The local Buffalo News editorial. Fatal inhumanity. Border Patrol's treatment of Shah Alam demands answers in investigation. Nothing can excuse what happened to Rohingya refugee Nurul Aman Shah Alam. On a frigid February night, this man, who had obvious disabilities and could not speak English, was dropped off by Customs and Border Protection officers in the parking lot of a closed Tim Hortons on Magra Street, miles from his home. 5 days later, on February 24th, Shah Alam's lifeless body was found on Perry Street near a KeyBank Center. In a series of reports, the news has followed the tragic, shocking story which first appeared in an investigative post. It is a story riddled with missing parts and unanswered questions. The CBP has not given an adequate explanation for its actions. The Erie County Sheriff's Office released Shah Alam from the holding center into custody of the federal agency, which through a spokesperson Border Patrol agents offered him a courtesy ride, which he chose to accept to a coffee shop, determined to be a warm, safe location near his last known address. It was neither warm nor safe, but that's not the only thing that doesn't make sense. Shah Alam's family had posted bond for the 56-year-old's release and expected that he would return to his home and participate in ongoing Ramadan celebrations with them. The family had fled religious persecutions in Burma. They were admitted to the U.S. last year, just before the Trump administration suspended the program. But Border Patrol did not bother to inform Shah Alam's family, lawyers, or city officials or make any connections that would have averted this tragedy. There appears to be no reason for CBP or any other federal agency to detain Shah Alam, who was in the U.S. legally as a refugee fleeing persecution. Once he was bonded out, he should have been allowed to return home. There's no excuse, just the likely explanation of overreach from a federal agency that clearly prefers to detain first and ask questions later. Another life was thrown away thanks to a series of tragically misguided actions. Both the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Customs and Border Protection agencies are in urgent need of strong oversight before more harm occurs. No one disputes that Shah Alam was in the holding center after his arrest last year on assault and other charges related to a fraught encounter with Buffalo police. But process was followed. Shah Alam, through his attorneys, Legal Aid Bureau of Buffalo pleaded guilty to lesser charges and bail was posted. Unfortunately, an immigration detainer that would require a person in custody to be turned over to immigration authorities had been filed at the time of the arrest. Even so, Border Patrol, once aware that Shah Alam was here illegally, should have made sure that he was able to reach his family. At the least, his attorneys or social services should have been contacted, especially given that the Rohingya man could not speak English and was partially blind. None of that happened. Instead, he was left stranded at a closed Tim Hortons with no shoes and no way to contact family. Buffalo Mayor Sean Ryan stated a reaction that many share. That decision from U.S. Customs and Border Protection was unprofessional and inhumane. Other area lawmakers are taking what action they can. Representative Tim Kennedy, joined by other House Democrats, has sent a letter to Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem demanding a federal investigation. Calling Shah Alam's death a moral failure, Kennedy asked the question many are asking. Why was Border Patrol responsible for transporting Shah Alam? Why leave him at a closed facility on a cold night? Was his disability taken into account at all? What about translation services? Governor Kathy Hochul has another pointed question. Where is Kristi Noem's outrage? This looks like a massive failure of humanity by an agency that has the word protection in its name. Shah Alam's death must be investigated. Additionally, Border Patrol and ICE must be reined in by Congress, or more tragedies like this will inevitably follow. Linda?
Thank you, Larry. The editorial cartoons, the first one's by Steve Breen of Creator Syndicate, and it shows in shadow three people trying desperately to carry a shipping storage container. They're holding it on their backs and they're bent over. And there's a definition there. Economists. American households and businesses bearing nearly 90% of cost of Trump tariffs. And the second cartoon is by Michael Ramirez, Creator Syndicate. And it shows it shows a family, and it's obviously at a therapy session. And there's mom sitting there with her legs crossed, and there's in the middle it's a young, it's not a toddler, maybe a 6-year-old, and he's sitting there and he's playing with his cell phone. And then there's dad sitting on the other side of him, and his eyes are all bugged out, and he's got his hands fisted and he's got his thumbs down. He's in a typical form of playing on a cell phone without the cell phone. And so Joey's the young child, and he is seated there, and he says, "My name is Joey, and I'm a social media-holic." And of course, there's nothing from the mom and dad, but they're obviously in the same state. Larry?
Thank you, Linda. Everybody's column. Mandated spending is crippling Cattaraugus County. Discussion of a potential New York City bailout should prompt a broader conversation about structural fiscal imbalances affecting counties across the state. In Cattaraugus County's proposed 2026 budget, $21 million is dedicated to the county's local share of Medicaid. That amounts to roughly $273 per resident each year. New York is unique in requiring counties outside New York City to contribute to Medicaid in this manner. Mandated spending now accounts for 80.49% of the county's total tax levy, leaving less than one-fifth under local discretion. This significantly limits a county's ability to invest in infrastructure, workforce development, and public safety. Simultaneously, the Public Service Commission has approved substantial electric rate increases that affect households and small businesses statewide, with rural regions often bearing higher delivery costs. If $1.4 billion in state resources are available, policymakers should consider options that provide broad-based relief, including mandate reduction or utility stabilization, rather than narrowly targeting assistance. Equitable governance requires examining long-standing structural obligations alongside immediate fiscal pressures. This from John Pfeffer, supervisor from the town of Ashford. Linda?
Thank you, Larry. How to strengthen affordable health care. I have devised a plan to replace the Affordable Care Act that is sure to please the President, and it's so simple that I can't believe that no one has thought of it already. We don't really have to tweak the current plan much, just change the name from Obamacare to Trump Care. By now we all know that the President has no respect for the former President, thus despising anything that carries his name, and that the President loves to have things named after himself. One of the hundreds of Republicans in Congress who are continually seeking to curry favor with Trump can propose it, thus gaining brownie points, and the rest can vote for it. Then it can be adequately funded so Americans will be able to afford health care again. And of course, once the current term comes to an end, the name can be changed back. Just don't tell Trump. This is written by Jill Monticelli of Lancaster. Larry?
Thank you, Linda. Republicans should not be pointing fingers. After reading Joe Battenfield's article about how corrupt Democrats in Congress are when it comes to making money while in office, I had to sit back and scratch my head and wonder what planet he lives on. I also wonder if he has investigated how much money his hero, Donald Trump, and his family and friends have made since returning to power. These MAGA hypocrites can always find dirt when it comes to the Dems and go clueless when it comes to Trump and his machinations. What Democrats have done, I am sure, pales in comparison to the actions of your fearless leader since being put back in power. Mr. Battenfield, next time you criticize a political party, do me a favor. Do your homework and then have the guts to compare any transcriptions to those of your party and see who comes out on top. This from Bill Mendel of West Seneca.
Thank you, Larry. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time is 9:33. Excuse me. Some opinion columns. This one is written by Andreas Kluth of Bloomsburg Opinion. It's titled, U.S. Strikes on Iran Make It Feel Like 2003 in the Middle East. Less than a year ago, President Trump gave a speech in the Middle East in which he excoriated his predecessors for their habit of launching forever wars in that region. Alluding to the American invasion of Iraq in 2003 in particular, he accused them of intervening in complex societies that they did not even understand themselves, with the result that they wrecked far more nations than they built. And here is Trump now, intervening in a complex society that he does not understand. The hour of your freedom is at hand, he told the Iranian people in announcing the start of what appears to be a massive, indeed maximalist, U.S.-Israeli campaign against the regime in Tehran. The Iranians are already returning fire, shooting at targets linked to America across the Gulf region. This is not a surgical and limited strike like Operation Midnight Hammer in June. This is war on both barrels, unpredictable and possibly uncontrollable. The lives of courageous American heroes may be lost, and we may have casualties. That often happens in war, Trump conceded in announcing the attack. Has he just launched the latest American forever war, the exact kind that he promised his own MAGA base to end and avoid? The differences and similarities between 2026 and 2003 are eerie. Then, as now, American intervention was ostensibly, but not really, about weapons of mass destruction. Iraq turned out not to have them, and Iran doesn't have them now. The U.S. says it obliterated its nuclear facilities, although it's unclear whether the regime could rebuild the covert program. Then, as now, the actual war aims are unclear and shifting. As even American conservatives are saying, it was never about nuclear weapons, it was never about helping the Iranian people, and Iran was genuinely negotiating a diplomatic solution. Some of the differences make the attack of 2026 look worse, posted Michael McFaul, a veteran diplomat at Stanford University's Hoover Institution. George W. Bush didn't get authorization from the United Nations Security Council to invade Iraq in 2003, but at least he tried, whereas Trump didn't even do that. And Bush did get authorization from Congress, whereas Trump has not. Not least, Bush in 2003 went to war with a coalition of the willing that included more than 40 countries. Trump is attacking with the support of precisely one ally, Israel. What happens next is unclear. The regime of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei knows its flight is existential and will give it all it's got. Moreover, as overwhelming as American air power may be, history suggests that regime change, much less nation building, without ground forces is hard, if not impossible. And Trump wants to avoid putting boots on the ground because he knows his MAGA base won't stand for it. If ever history demanded that Congress reclaim its constitutional monopoly in declaring war, that moment is now. Democrats and disappointingly few Republicans, Senator Rand Paul deserves honorable mention, already tried and failed to revive the Nixon-era War Powers Resolution in the run-up to Trump's extraction of the Venezuelan dictator in January. They will try again this coming week. For the sake of the Founding Fathers, for the sake of the American Republic, for the sake of the Middle East and the world, Americans legislators must not let this president turn Congress into a rubber-stamp parliament again. Trump has not made his case to the public. Just as it was not enough in 2003 to assert that Saddam Hussein was evil, it is not enough now to remind the world that Iran's regime is wicked. The authority to launch war, and certainly a potential forever war, does not lie with him. It lies with Congress. Larry?
Thank you, Linda. From Sheldon Jacobson. It's Sheldon H. Jacobson. Crunching numbers as affordability crisis continues to worsen. The word that seems to concern many people today is affordability. Whether one is purchasing a home, buying food, or paying doctor bills, everything seems more expensive. And the fact is, everything is more expensive. The Consumer Price Index in December 2021 stood at 278. By December 2025, it had reached 324, an increase of 16.5%. When wages do not keep up with price increases, the buying power of the money people earn erodes, effectively creating the crisis many are experiencing. Politicians from both sides of the aisle will quickly shift the blame toward their opponents. Yet the affordability issue finds its roots in long-term fiscal irresponsibility that has ballooned our national debt to nearly $39 trillion. This debt has grown over time because the government spends more than it collects in revenue. The national debt reached 124% of gross domestic product in fiscal 2025. This means the debt has grown to be 24% more than the value of all goods and services produced in our nation in a year. Interest payments are now one of the largest cost categories of the federal budget. As the national debt continues to grow, interest payments will increasingly squeeze the federal budget. Eliminating the debt directly is not an option, since this would demand either a default or severe cutbacks. The only feasible path forward is to allow inflation to erode its value. The Federal Reserve's target inflation rate is 2%. The current rate is 2.7%. This difference may seem small on the surface, but with interest rates paid on savings drifting down. How is this affecting consumers? At 2% inflation, prices double every 36 years. But at 3% inflation, they double every 24 years. If we look over a 5-year period, prices will be nearly 16% higher than 3% inflation versus 10.4% higher at 2%. Since 1/4 of households already live paycheck to paycheck, higher inflation means that a larger group of people will struggle or fail to afford basic necessities. President Trump has been feuding with Jerome Powell, the current chairman of the Federal Reserve, over interest rates. Trump wants lower rates to reduce interest payments on the national debt and to fuel economic growth. But low rates come with a risk of higher inflation. Powell wants to set interest rates to balance inflation risk against unemployment risk. The Fed has been lowering interest rates over the last year, with a new chairman set to be installed in the spring. It remains to be seen whether this trend will continue. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has made changes to the Consumer Price Index over time, working to provide an accurate picture of prices being paid by consumers for goods and services. If modifications to how the Consumer Price Index are made that underestimate what people are paying, this could provide ammunition for the central bank to lower interest rates, even if true inflation may be higher than what is being reported. Given the president's affinity for putting people in positions of power to manipulate statistics, such a possibility cannot be dismissed. If the data being reported underestimates inflation, the resulting gap between the actual rate and the reported rate will slowly erode the value of money as buying power is reduced. This means that Americans' standard of living will drop. Trump keeps saying that prices are coming down, but this is not what consumers are seeing in grocery stores and other commercial outlets. Indeed, even if the data reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that inflation has been tamed, a growing number of people cannot afford basic necessities. Affordability will, unfortunately, continue to be an issue. Linda?
Thank you, Larry. Some business and financial news. AM&A's ownership dispute now clouded by foreclosure. One of the purported owners of the former AM&A's department store building in downtown Buffalo is facing foreclosure by her lender, but it's not clear how much that will matter since the ownership of the building remains in dispute and mired in a years-long court battle between two Chinese investor groups. BP3 Capital, a private investment firm with a Queens address that is owned by Howard Wasserman of Jerusalem, Israel, filed a foreclosure against 377 Main Realty and its principal, Elena Fu, seeking repayment of a $1 million mortgage from January 2020 plus interest and fees. The lawsuit asked the state Supreme Court in Erie County for a judgment against Fu, including the sale of the property to recoup the money. The loan is backed by a vacant 10-story building at 377 Main Street in Buffalo, the one-time home of AM&A's store until it was sold to the Bon-Ton in 1994, which closed just a year later. Aside from its brief use as an upscale women's department store in 1998, it has been vacant ever since, with multiple owners. The foreclosure adds another level of complexity to an already complex problem. While Fu may owe money on the mortgage, it's not clear if she ever owned the building. The city also has a lien on the building. The building was purchased for $2.8 million in late 2014 by Landco H&L, a Chinese and American investor group based in Flushing, Queens, led by Lily Lee. The group unveiled plans for $70 million makeover into an unbranded 300-room hotel that later morphed into plans for a Wyndham hotel with 340 rooms after control of the project shifted from Lee to Jining Bali Bao and Milome Sally Liu, a couple who live in Glen Cove. This is where the story gets complicated. According to court documents in prior litigation that is still pending, Lee sold her shares to Landco to Lou in December 2015 for as much as $2.3 million over time. But Lou was forbidden from transferring more than half of her Landco shares without Lee's consent. Lee says Lou violated and voided that agreement by transferring those shares 6 months later to Buffalo Hotel Management, a company Lou owns. So Lee filed papers with the state reasserting her control, but apparently without Lou's knowledge. Then in January 2020, Landco, under Lee's signature and without Lou's knowledge, sold the AM&A building to Foos 377 Main Realty for $2 million, with the deed filed a few days later. Less than 2 weeks later, Landco, under Lou's authority, sued 377 Main Realty and Lee for fraud, alleging that the deed was executed without proper corporate authority. Foos 377 Main Realty countered and asked for a declaration of its sole ownership, a lien, and damages of $2 million. Meanwhile, Chinese investor Weiping Cao sued Landco, Lou, and Bao for fraud and breach of contract, saying she is owed $7 million for investments made to the project in 2017. A trial is tentatively scheduled for April. Larry?
Thank you, Linda. Firm proposes battery energy storage facility at Dunkirk site. A North Carolina energy storage developer wants to build a $500 million battery storage system in Chautauqua County that would be capable of holding enough electricity to power 250,000 homes for up to 4 hours. GCI Energy, based in Davidson, North Carolina, is proposing to construct a system of 144 giant containers with racks of batteries inside, using 16 acres of vacant land in the city of Dunkirk that it would lease. The project would occupy 492,228 square feet and would be able to store up to 250 megawatts of energy. Called GCI Lighthouse and located at 653 Brigham Road, the site is surrounded on 3 sides by railroad tracks and transmission lines. South of Route 5 and the former Dunkirk Steam Generation Station, the structure would be the size of metal shipping containers and would be about 12 feet in height. The batteries would be charged at times when power usage is low. That electricity could come from anywhere in the system, regardless of whether it was generated by gas, coal, wind, solar, or hydroelectric sources. At times of low demand, the batteries will be charged from the grid. GCI Director of Permitting and Counsel Daniel Brennan said, "When demand is high, the batteries can discharge their energy back to the grid and make sure the energy is available and where it's needed. It's a more efficient way to use the transmission grid." First proposed 2 years ago, the project would eventually be acquired by Neoen, a French company based in Paris and owned by Brookfield Corp. That is one of the world's leading independent producers of renewable energy, with nearly 200 projects across 3 continents. Dunkirk would be its first U.S. asset. The location is in an area that's well suited for this and off the beaten path, Deputy County Executive Mark Geisey said. There's a need for energy storage given the state of our electric grid right now. Specific costs and funding are still being determined. GCI is asking the Chautauqua County Industrial Development Agency for up to $46 million in sales and mortgage tax breaks and a payment in lieu of taxes on the property through 2 years of construction and 25 years of operation. Linda?
Thank you, Larry. As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, call us at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555. Anderson, Nay Morris, Carol S. Anderson, Randy. Baldo, Rose Ann, Nay Falcone. Benjamin, Brian. Davenport, Kenneth. Fisher, Laura. Hayek, Sororo, Mira, Nay Baudi. Hargrove, Tyrone Lamar. Holler, John Henry. Manos, James G. Marenka, Robert. McBride, James W. McCormick, James N. Mustarella, Mary. Nugent, Jr., Russell. Pluzinski, Andrea Lynn. Rose, Terrence M., Sr. Schaub, Carolyn L. Nay Fisher. Tesk, Stephen. Trost, Timothy Joel. Webb, Joan. If you need further information on any of these names, please give us a call at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555. Larry?
Thank you, Linda. Royal Stars. Happy birthday for Wednesday, March 4th, 2026. You are gentle, sensitive, and forever curious. You have a rich imagination and great powers of concentration. This year, you will reap the benefits of your previous hard work. Aries, 4 stars. This is a feel-good day. You have a warm feeling in your tummy. However, you might feel mildly stressed or perhaps excited. Tonight, listen and cooperate. Taurus, 4 stars. A friend or member of a group might throw you a curveball today. Be ready for this. Or perhaps you will meet a real character today, someone intriguing and different. Tonight, get organized. Gemini, 3 stars. This is a tricky day because authority figures might surprise you. Busted! Fortunately, you look good in their eyes, which will help you deal with the unexpected. Tonight, socialize. Cancer, 4 stars. Travel plans might change today. Similarly, school schedules also might change. Tonight, cocoon at home. Leo, 3 stars. Keep an eye on your banking and anything you do with shared property, taxes, and debt. Something unexpected could impact these areas tonight. Interesting discussions. Virgo, 4 stars. Today, a partner, spouse, or close friend will surprise you in some way. They might say or do something that you least expect, or they might introduce you to someone who is unusual tonight. Check your money. Libra, 4 stars. Something pleasant related to your job, medical workers, or something to do with a pet might please you today. Someone might do a favor for you. Tonight, you win. Scorpio, 4 stars. Because unexpected things could happen today, this is an interesting day for you. Unexpected invitations might come your way. Tonight, enjoy privacy. Sagittarius, 3 stars. Your home routine might be interrupted today. You might buy something high-tech or exciting. A gift from a family member might delight you. Tonight, be friendly. Capricorn, 4 stars. This could be an exciting day. You might meet new faces and see new places. You might also come up with an exciting, even brilliant idea. Tonight, you're admired. Aquarius, 3 stars. This could be a bountiful day for you. Gifts, money, or financial advantages might come your way unexpectedly. Tonight, explore and learn. Pisces, 4 stars. This is the perfect day to seek an exciting break from your daily routine. New friends who are fascinating and interesting might appear. Tonight, check your finances.
Thank you, Larry. Hints from Heloise. Make the most of the food you buy. Dear Heloise, when I buy a rotisserie chicken, I eat one leg and thigh while it is nice, warm, and tasty. Then I put the bag of chicken in the fridge. I later take the breast meat off for chicken salad to eat alone or as a sandwich. And I always put a half a teaspoon of curry powder in the chicken salad. I use the remaining leg and thigh meat to make the chicken noodle casserole, and boil up everything else into a delicious soup. From Fran. Pod problem. Dear Heloise, for the past few months I've been getting white marks on some of my dark clothes when I wash them. I've changed the detergent, reduced the amount of detergent, and cleaned the machine by hand with commercial tub cleaner. What else could be causing this? From Candace. Candace, the only time I have heard of this is when someone uses pods. You might want to consider liquid soap. Also, there is a possibility that the section where you add bleach is leaking. Do any of my readers know of or have had this problem? And if so, what did you do to stop it? From Heloise. Remembering gift cards. Dear Heloise, throughout my long life, many times I've visited a store or restaurant intending to use a gift card but end up forgetting and paying with a credit card. Recently, I discovered that if you place the gift card in front of your credit card in your wallet, it's virtually impossible to forget to use it. I've mentioned this minor discovery to several people. Not one was aware. That was from Colin. Lint roller on carpet. Dear Heloise, my husband and I are both empty nesters and retired. We've lived in our home for 31 years and have always enjoyed throwing parties for family and friends. A couple of months ago, several people reached out and said they were in the neighborhood and wanted to visit. Since we live alone, our house is 95% clean, except for little pieces of lint and other small items that are on the carpet. Not wanting to pull out the vacuum cleaner before my guests arrived, I broke out my lint roller, and before I knew it, the carpet looked like I had vacuumed. Issue solved. And that's from Sherry. And bed wedges. Dear Eloise, I wanted to share a safety tip that has made a big difference in our home. Recently, my elderly husband fell out of bed during the night and fractured 3 ribs along with injuring his elbow. It was a frightening experience for both of us. While we were in the emergency room, a nurse mentioned that she used bed wedges to keep her children from rolling out of bed and suggested we try the same idea for my husband. We followed her advice and placed the wedges along the sides of the bed. The results have been wonderful. The wedges help prevent him from rolling out of bed, especially when he has vivid dreams or restless nights. He now sleeps more securely, and I have a much greater peace of mind knowing he is safer. Sometimes the simplest ideas can make a big difference, and that's from Judy. Larry?
Thank you, Linda. From the Digest, Trump reverses course in fight with law firms. A day after abandoning its efforts to enforce executive orders that targeted some of the world's most elite law firms, President Donald Trump's administration abruptly reversed course Tuesday and said it would proceed with the court fight. The unexplained about-face represents the latest development in a year-long effort by the Republican administration to impose sanctions against major law firms whose attorneys did legal work that Trump opposed or that was associated with prosecutors who investigated him. Judges who received challenges to the executive orders from targeted firms uniformly ruled that the government prompted an appeal from the Justice Department. And Supreme Court blocks New York redistricting order. The U.S. Supreme Court handed Representative Nicole Malikotakis, Republican New York, a lifeline by ruling that her Staten Island-based district does not need to be redrawn ahead of the 2026 midterm congressional elections. The conservative top court blocked a state court judge ruling that ordered the state's redistricting committee to redraw the lines of the GOP-friendly district because he said it unfairly diluted the power of black and Latino voters. The ruling means Maliotakis NY11 district will remain largely unchanged, covering Staten Island and a small slice of Republican-leaning South Brooklyn, at least through the fall midterms. This is unadorned racial discrimination, an inherently odious activity that violates the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause, except in the most extraordinary case, Justice Samuel Alito wrote. The outcome amounts to a victory for Republicans in the unprecedented mid-decade-long tug-of-war over redistricting that could help determine control of the closely divided House of Representatives. And briefly, Spain. President Donald Trump threatened Tuesday to end trade with Spain, citing a lack of support over the U.S. and Israel attacks on Iran and the European nation's resistance to increasing its NATO spending. We don't want anything to do with Spain, Trump said. And also from France, French President Emmanuel Macron ordered France's nuclear-powered aircraft carrier Tuesday to move from the Baltic Sea to the Mediterranean to help protect Allied assets during the ongoing war in the Middle East.
Thank you, Larry. You're listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for Wednesday, March 4th on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. We'll return for more readings after the short break. Your readers today are
Larry Beenen
and Linda Renaud.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. Your readers are
Linda Ranella.
and Larry Beamer.
On to some local and regional news. Man pleads guilty to COVID aid fraud, faces $1.4 million in restitution. A Buffalo man whom prosecutors said spent pandemic relief funds at adult entertainment clubs, hotels, and restaurants pleaded guilty Tuesday to wire fraud and narcotics charges. Brian Avery Smith, 52, faces a mandatory 5-year prison sentence on a narcotics charge alone. The wire fraud charge carries a maximum prison term of 20 years, but federal sentencing guidelines included in the plea agreement suggest a term of up to 8 2/3 years on both convictions. Smith becomes the 14th pandemic fraud defendant whose conviction was secured by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Buffalo, and the defendants account for nearly $7 million worth of COVID-19 fraud, according to a Buffalo News review of the cases. Smith sent 2 fraudulent Paycheck Protection loan applications and 1 economic injury disaster loan application on behalf of B. Smith and Companies to the Small Business Administration and SBA lenders. The federal investigation into B. Smith and Companies found inaccurate revenues and employee counts intentionally reported on the EIDL and PPP applications, according to court papers. The company, purported to be a consulting business in the debt collection industry, was no longer operating and had no employees or revenue when Smith applied for the funds. Smith, the other company, Hype Beast Gala LLC, reported to be a retail seller of sneakers among other products. Businesses are required to certify their gross revenue and cost of goods sold during a 12-month period from January 31st, 2019 through January 31st, 2020. Hypebeast was not formed until July 14th, 2020. U.S. District Judge John L. Sinatra Jr. allowed Smith, who is now self-employed selling clothing, to remain in custody until his September 11th sentencing. The plea agreement includes a forfeiture of $140,465, the amount received by Smith from his own fraudulent applications, and a restitution of more than $1.4 million to the SBA because he assisted others with fraudulent applications. Smith assisted others who submitted 70 fraudulent applications for the funds between April 2020 and May 21 for an actual loss of $1.4 million, Assistant U.S. Attorney Colleen McCarthy said in court. When Sinatra asked Smith to describe in his own words the crime, Smith replied, "I submitted inaccurate information for businesses I had to the SBA, and I assisted others in doing that, and their information was inaccurate as well." Smith also admitted a narcotics count, a possession with intent to distribute a mixture or substance containing cocaine, stemming from a New York State Police traffic stop in March 2025. "I picked up 2 kilos of cocaine from someone and was transporting it to another person," Smith told the judge. Through the CARES Act, the federal government responded to the public health emergency with the Paycheck Protection Program, among other incentives, to ensure that families devastated by illness or job loss continued to receive a paycheck. This was not Smith's first brush with fraud. In September 2012, he was charged with wire and bank fraud in Western New York. In that case, Smith was charged with causing fraudulent home loan applications and supporting documentation to be submitted to banks, credit unions, and lenders, and also defrauding people under the guise of investing their money in real estate. Instead, Smith used fraudulent applications to open a credit card and to obtain a Land Rover vehicle. Smith, who applied for over $1 million in fraudulent loans in that case, was sentenced to 63 months incarceration after pleading to bank fraud. Larry?
Thank you, Linda. Comptroller seeks to hire employee fired by Brown. Buffalo Comptroller Barbara Miller Williams is seeking Common Council approval to hire a former city employee who was fired amid controversy. The Comptroller's Office is asking the Council to approve Carla Thomas, the former Human Resources Commissioner who was fired in 2011, after officials learned that the city paid more than $2 million in benefits to deceased former city employees. The job in the Comptroller's Office as an executive assistant, would pay a salary of $94,760. In a phone interview Tuesday, Miller Williams said Thomas' previous role at City Hall was nothing to do with the position for which her extensive experience in government at the city, county, and state levels makes her an ideal candidate. I base my decisions on hiring each and every employee that I've had the opportunity to hire in the Department of Audit and Control based on what they bring to the table, Miller Williams said. Thomas is currently Director of Marketing and Community Outreach at the Community Health Center of Buffalo, where she has worked since 2015, according to her LinkedIn page. Miller Williams said Thomas' experience in that role over the last decade also gives her experience outside of government and the vast network of connections she has built will be valuable to the Comptroller's office and city. When I had conversations with her, she has the ability to bring in a perspective that is very different and unique from what we were currently dealing with in government, Miller Williams said. Thomas did not respond to messages seeking comment. Her 2011 firing was a contentious and drawn-out process as she fought her termination. Then Mayor Byron Brown ultimately fired her after a hearing process, citing a report produced as part of the process, including a mayor was justified in terminating her. The Human Resources Commissioner is the only city department head who does not serve at the pleasure of the mayor. The position is protected by state law in order to prevent public officials from exerting political influence over personnel matters. Commissioners are granted 6-year terms upon being hired, and municipalities must go through a hearing process in order to carry out a termination, as the city did in firing Thomas. In statements she made at the time, Thomas blamed a staffer for missing the errors and said she inherited the issues and was working to fix them. She maintained she was a scapegoat for larger departmental problems. The public falling out with Brown became a long-running saga. Thomas has long been a member of Grassroots, the black political organization that came to power in the 1990s, elevating the careers of Brown, the first black and longest tenured mayor in the history of the city, and other prominent politicians, including Miller Williams and Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples Stokes, who employed Thomas in her Albany office before she worked for the city. Miller Williams said she has known Thomas since at least the 1980s. She's part of the fabric of the Buffalo community, particularly Buffalo's black community, Miller Williams said. She's always been around. Council members typically defer to the comptroller and mayor's office in appointments outside of legal issues or other serious concerns. Most council members contacted for this story either declined to comment or did not respond. Fillmore District Council member Michael Nowakowski noted that Miller Williams has discretion to hire who she wants. But because this individual was let go and fired by a previous mayor for physical impropriety of paying $2 million to dead people, I believe she owes taxpayers and council members a communication on this hire, Nowakowski said. Maston District Council member Zanetta Everhart also said the comptroller is free to hire who she wishes, but that there should be further discussion on Thomas's appointment. I think it would be great for her to communicate to the Common Council and the public why she believes that this past issue with Ms. Thomas is not a concern, Everhart wrote in a statement. The council voted in its regular meeting Tuesday to send the appointment to the Civil Service Committee, where it will be discussed next week. Linda?
Thank you, Larry. 3 short articles here, folks. Vandemark set to close its chemical plant in Lockport. Vandemark Chemical is closing its plant in Lockport, eliminating 70 jobs. The company will close the Mill Street facility in the second half of the year, said Kyla Olson, Human Resources Director. Vandemark did not specify a date for the closing or provide a reason for the shutdown. The company, founded in 1951, makes products used in life sciences, electronics, polymers, coatings, personal care, flavor, and fragrances. Vandemark is a portfolio company of SK Capital, a New York City-based private equity firm. PBS series Antiques Roadshow will visit Genesee Country Village in June. The long-running PBS series Antiques Roadshow will visit Genesee Country Village and Museum in Munford on June 17th for an all-day appraisal event that will become 3 one-hour episodes to air in 2027. It'll be the second time the series will have a Rochester area stop. Visiting historic locations like Genesee Country Village and Museum, meeting the people who will come to the Roadshow's event, seeing their treasures and discovering the personal stories that make these objects so important is a real privilege, said executive producer Marcia Bemko in a news release. According to the release, guests will receive free verbal evaluations of their antiques, art, and collectibles by experts from the country's leading auction houses and independent dealers. Each ticketed guest is invited to bring 2 items for appraisal. Free tickets for admission must be obtained in advance. Fans can enter the 2026 Antiques Roadshow sweepstakes for a chance to win a pair of free tickets per household. Complete entry rules are available at pbs.org/roadshow tickets. Folks, if you need anything repeated, give us a call at the station, 716-821-5555. And another short, Fredonia University music major moves ahead on The Voice. Another season of NBC's reality singing competition series The Voice, another Western New York connection. Lucas West, a SUNY Fredonia State music major from the Rochester suburb of Fairport, moved on to the battle rounds after his recent blind audition performing the Elton John tune Benny and the Jets ended with judges John Lennon and Adam Levine turning their chairs in hopes of getting him to join their teams. West joins previous Western New Yorkers Cammie Clune, Sydney Sturlis, Joshua Vicanti, and Elliot Hunt and Chris Lillis of Letter to Elise in passing their blind auditions over several seasons. West chose Legend to be his coach. NBC said the date of his battle round performance hasn't been decided. West, a senior in Fredonia's School of College of Music, Theater, and Dance, has a concentration in jazz studies. According to the university, he plays trombone and piano in the Fredonia Jazz Orchestra and sings in multiple ensembles in the vocal jazz program. Larry?
Thank you, Linda. USCAA's basketball tourney returns to City. Call it Early March Madness. For a second straight year, the Small College Basketball National Championship Tournament is being played in Western New York, providing a boon to local economy 2 weeks before the NCAA basketball tournament comes to town. The United States Collegiate Athletic Association's Basketball Small College National Championship brings to the area athletes playing for 34 schools independent of NCAA from 12 states to compete this week for Division I and II men's and women's titles. Games are being played mostly at the 2,700-seat arena, Erie County Community College, downtown Bert Flickinger Athletic Center, and Villa Maria College's newly renovated Athletic Center in Cheektowaga. The event is expected to bring around $2.1 million in economic impact, with more than 800 visiting players and staff coming to Buffalo. And that doesn't count what is expected to be spent by the expected 1,000 fans of the schools coming to attend games. The championships were held in Buffalo for the first time last year and will remain here through 2028, creating an expected economic impact of more than $8 million over the 40 years. The association originally made a 2-year deal with Buffalo to be the host city and then extended it for another 2 seasons last year. It's a great opportunity during a period of need for us, said Patrick Collar, President and CEO of Visit Buffalo and the Buffalo Sports Commission. It just plays into the fact that Buffalo and Erie County is a great sports town, and we love hosting amateur athletic events, he added. We've established a great relationship with the USCAA, and we knew we would have them through 2026, but for them to extend through 2028 is a surprise. The USCAA event also serves as an ideal prep for the NCAA's men's basketball tournament coming to town on March 19th and 21st. That will bring 8 teams and around 19,000 fans to Buffalo with an economic impact projected to be around $7 million. The area has hosted games in the first 2 rounds of March Madness 7 times since it first came to Buffalo in 2000. It's a great lead-in to the NCAA's, which is a little bit bigger, said Collar, who is in deep preparation for the tournament coming to the KeyBank Center in Buffalo for the first time since 2022. But big or small, it shows Buffalo's fantastic destination for these types of events, he added. We do a good job of putting on these events, and we've got the local infrastructure for it. The USCAA's National Championship kicks off Monday with a skills contest that included dunks, high jumps, and scoring races. Games were set to begin Tuesday, finishing with championship contests on Saturday. Teams and players representing small colleges from New York, New Jersey, Vermont, Maine, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, Virginia, South Carolina, Florida, and Texas are participating. The USCAA is based in Pittsburgh, is a 70-member association consisting of small schools playing independently of the NCAA. It was founded in 2001 as a reformation of the National Small College Athletic Association. The Buffalo Sports Commission and two local USCAA schools, Bryan and Stratton College and Villa Maria College, assist the association in putting on the tournament. Collar said USCAA's CEO B.J. Burgess liked what Buffalo had to offer, and the city being compact enough to offer venues and visitor attractions near each other. In between games, visitors will be able to experience places like Niagara Falls, Buffalo AKG Art Museum, restaurants featuring buffalo wings and other local attractions. The Buffalo Sabres play at home this week on Tuesday. All those teams needed places to stay, eat, and recreate throughout the week, creating millions of dollars in spending. They are bringing with them friends, family members, and fans who will add to that number. Erie County saw its hotel occupancy increase by more than 14% during the week USCAA's tournament was hosted in Buffalo last year. The strong relationship also puts Buffalo in a good place to host some of the USCAA's other sports tournaments in the future. Burgess is a member of the Buffalo Sports Commission's Advisory Council, which is dedicated to supporting and growing the sports industry in the area. The support from the Buffalo Sports Commission, Visit Buffalo, and co-host member institutions Villa Maria College and Bryan and Stratton of Buffalo has made this one of our most successful championship events, Burgess said. We look forward to building on that success in the years to come.
Thank you, Larry. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time is 10:17. On to sports. Buffalo Bills. Pickings for a possible replacement for Trubisky are slim at best. And this is the first of 11 stories previewing the start of NFL free agency on March 11th. This is by Catherine Fitzgerald. When it comes to off-season buzz, there's no buzzier position than quarterback. As the NFL gears up for free agency, quarterbacks will determine how the dominoes fall across the league. The Buffalo Bills are clearly set with Josh Allen at quarterback, but with backup Mitch Trubisky, a pending free agent, the Bills have some work to do. Not only that, but they'll want to keep an eye on the free agent quarterback market, knowing that free agency often ebbs and flows based off quarterback movement. The free agent quarterbacks this year's draft class leaves much to be desired. While Fernando Mendoza of national champion Indiana will likely go number 1 to the Las Vegas Raiders, the rest of the draft class still needs a fair amount of development. That makes free agency even more important. While Trubisky has embraced his backup role and loves Buffalo, Bills general manager Brandon Beane understands that the 31-year-old quarterback is still likely to explore other options before committing anywhere. Like always as a free agent, like these other guys, you want to see what his market is, Beane said in January. Does anyone want him to try and start or not? You know, guys want to play. But I think Mitch really likes it here, and we would definitely be open to bringing him back if we can make it work and if he doesn't have some great opportunity. Whilst other teams may be looking, it makes sense for Trubisky and the Bills to come to an agreement to bring him back to Buffalo. There are other major needs on the Bills roster that backup quarterback can't catapult up the list, and Trubisky is comfortable in Orchard Park. Elsewhere, quarterback movement will also shape the rest of the division. The Miami Dolphins benched Tua Tagovailoa to end their season. The New York Jets are evaluating as well. In New England, the Bills have seen how quickly a team can ascend with a franchise quarterback in Drake May. While the Jets and the Dolphins work through their options, it's worth watching how those teams evolve this free agency. The market could shift more if Tagovailoa and Arizona's Kyler Murray are officially released. Both their respective teams are reportedly seeking trade partners, although Tua's contract has proven prohibitive. The Cardinals are expected to release Murray next week. Some early quarterback news came Tuesday as the Indianapolis Colts placed the transition tag on quarterback Daniel Jones, giving him the right of first refusal in negotiations. Jones was on an upward trajectory with the Colts until he tore his Achilles late in the season. Now he'll get another ride with Indy. In-house, while waiting to see where Trubisky lands, the Bills have already done a little work to round out their quarterback room. The Bills signed Shane Buechele to a one-year contract in February. He returns after a quick end-of-season stint with the Kansas City Chiefs. Buechele is close with Allen, a clear requirement of any Bills backup quarterback, and he is familiar with the Bills system, having first joined the team in August 2023. Larry?
Thank you, Linda. As clock ticks, Sabres discuss how to handle NHL trade deadline. Josh Norris remembers the constant pivot he went through exactly 1 year ago this week. The center had found out he was traded to the Buffalo Sabres after nearly 5 seasons with the Ottawa Senators and had to join his new team in Florida. He didn't just change teams the week of March 7, 2025. He had to make a physical move and a psychological move while negotiating travel. You play that first game after the whole trade happens, Norris said. I had to be on a flight all the way down there and had a connecting flight. Get in late. That's a really hard game to play. People don't understand how hard it is to play that first game after you get traded. Certain situations are different for some guys. It was emotional for me, but after that first game, I settled right in. The week of the NHL's deadline is one of the more active and complicated weeks on the league's calendar. It's a silly season come to life, rife with media speculation, and players on NHL teams find ways to shut out the noise and compartmentalize rather than fret over what their futures could be. You've got to stay focused on what you're doing, Sabres forward Peyton Krebs said. It's out of your control what happens. As a group, we continue to believe in what we're doing here, and we keep up the hard work every day, and good things will happen. Buy versus sell. The NHL trade deadline this year is 3 p.m. Friday, and the Sabres are in position to buy because of a berth in the NHL playoffs is a very real possibility. The Sabres began the week in second place in the Atlantic Division with 76 points, ahead of Tuesday's home game against the Vegas Golden Knights, which they won 3-2 after jumping out in front 3-0 and then hanging on. It's something new to me, Sabres captain Rasmus Dahlin said of the impact of this week. Let's see what happens. I have no idea, really. The team is doing good right now. We're just going to keep going, and that's Sabres general manager Jarmo Kekalainen's job to make those decisions. We just try to play good hockey. This year's Sabres haven't been strangers to one of the more emotionally chaotic weeks of the regular season. There's no question of who could get traded. And if a player is traded, there's the whole issue of logistics. Do I relocate my family? Do I know anybody on my new team? How do I assimilate to a new locker room in a matter of hours and over a few days? Will I spend the next few weeks with this team or the next year? There's also the matter of maintaining and not disrupting the balance within the current locker room, particularly in a playoff chase. We could get someone, or we could make no moves, and I don't think it would change the belief in the room, forward Tage Thompson said. The decisions that are going to get made at the deadline are out of our control. I love the chemistry and the belief we have in the room, and with that being said, I don't know if there's much that I would affect that moving forward. Finding out. The Sabres forward Beck Malenstein brought up reality of the trade deadline in today's NHL. You're probably going to read about a trade through the social media before you find out about it through word of mouth. A lot of guys, unfortunately these days, find out online before they even get a phone call, which I think is crazy, Malenstein said. You don't have your phone on you, and you get a call from someone who else has seen it. It's crazy how quickly things get out. Norris was part of a trade with Ottawa that shipped Dylan Cozens to the Senators, and Cozens said earlier this year he found out through social media that he was being shipped to the Senators. I actually saw on Twitter at first that it was confirmed that I got traded to Ottawa, and I was like, oh, okay, Cozens said in October. And it was confirmed by some pretty reputable sources. After that, I was kind of just waiting for a call to actually confirm it. A trade happens, and suddenly the player across the dressing room or in the stall next to you is headed to a new team, with another player claiming in to take that roster spot. Next day, you kind of go from hanging out with them every single day to they're gone, Krebs said. You don't see them at all. It's definitely a shocker, and it takes a little adjusting, but it's part of the business. Truth versus myth. Norris found out a hard truth about the trade deadline and of getting traded. The emotional weight that comes with getting traded, whether it's for players who are uprooted or for teammates who suddenly have to say goodbye to another teammate. Krebs, the Sabres left wing, wasn't dealt at the March deadline, but was part of one of the more notable trades involving the Sabres in recent years. Krebs and Alex Tuch came to Buffalo as part of the swap with the Golden Knights for Jack Eichel in November 2021. We don't know until fans know, Krebs said. It's always a shock to us. The truth to it is, it's not fun having families, but you've got to do with what you've got to do. Malenstein joined the Sabres as part of a trade with Washington in June 2024, but has been in NHL locker rooms the week of the trade deadline. He debunked one assumption that he gave a surprising description of the trade deadline. I would say a truth is that it's pretty quiet, Malenstein said. You don't really hear a whole lot until something happens. The myth is that it's probably there's a lot of conversations going on around the room. Injury update. The Sabres coach, Lindy Ruff, gave updates on 4 players who have missed significant time with injuries. Ruff said Yuri Kulich, blood clots, is expected to undergo another test Tuesday to determine if he will be cleared to resume a higher level of fitness. I don't know what that level will be or whether that involves contact, but we'll find out what that means. The doctors will make that decision. Ruff said Connor Timmins' broken leg is progressing, probably had his best day, and that Justin Danforth, broken kneecap, has been skating off and on. Jordan Greenway, hernia, has returned to the Sabres after getting treatment away from the team. He was on the bench in team sweats Monday morning.
Thank you, Larry. Back to the Buffalo Bills. This is the second of 11 stories previewing the start of NFL free agency on March 11th. Oh, excuse me, folks. Kenneth Walker III was not even born the last time a running back was named Most Valuable Player of the Super Bowl. Now 25, Walker etched his name in the record books last month when the Seattle Seahawks running back was named MVP of Super Bowl LX. Now, a few weeks later, Walker is staring down free agency, possibly switching teams after winning the championships. The Seahawks do not plan to franchise tag Walker, per reports from ESPN. Life is hard, relatively speaking, for running backs. Their shelf life is shorter than other positions, and the NFL moves on quickly. Look at this week with the Detroit Lions trading David Montgomery to the Houston Texans. At just 28 years old, Montgomery has had consecutive dips in production for rushing for 1,015 yards in 2023, leading the Lions to switch things up. The Texans have become a landing place for older running backs, with Joe Mixon and Nick Chubb heading there in previous years. While Montgomery was not set to become a free agent, having signed an extension in 24 to keep him in Detroit through 27, his case illustrates how things can quickly change for running backs. As it stands, the Buffalo Bills are set at the position. Their premier back, James Cook III, signed a 4-year, $48 million extension in August after a brief hold-in. Cook responded by taking the league's rushing title last season with 1,621 yards. The rest of the running back room, Ty Johnson, Ray Davis, and Frank Gore Jr., is still under contract as well. So the Bills can watch to see what the rest of the league does as they tend to other positional needs in Buffalo. On Tuesday, the New York Jets placed the franchise hang tag on Breece Hall, preventing him from hitting free agency. Hall would have been the top back on the market otherwise. Now other teams looking for a running back will react accordingly. And in-house, as it stands, the Bills should be set at running back, barring any cuts. A looming question, however, is what will happen with fullback Reggie Gilman. While Gilman has earned high praise from head coach Joe Brady, the fullback is set to become an unrestricted free agent. Fullback is a thankless position, and Gilman seems unsure of his future at the Bills' locker room cleanout. Gilman played 21% of offensive snaps in 2025, a career high, as well as 77% of snaps on special teams. Gilman has been with the Bills since 2020. Larry?
Thank you, Linda. UNC and Duke look to top wild opener. North Carolina won its first game against rival Duke this season on a buzzer beater that yielded 2 court stormings. One left a Blue Devils staffer with a bloody lip, setting up what could be a wild rematch on Saturday night. Adding to it, Duke is now number 1 in the AP Top 25 and playing its best basketball of the season. These guys have just put their head down, thrown themselves into the work. Coach John Shire said they've grown as much as any team that I've coached. Duke's run to number 1 started after the then number 14 North Carolina's stunning 71-68 win February 7th in Chapel Hill. Seth Trimble provided the heroics, hitting a corner three-pointer with 0.4 seconds left. That led to chaos as fans who rushed the court had to be cleared when officials determined more time was on the clock. A second court storming left the Duke staffer trampled and bloodied. Duke has since reeled off 7 straight wins, holding teams to an average of 58 points per game while winning by an average of 22 points. That includes a 93-64 beatdown of NC State that clinched the outright ACC regular season title just hours after the Blue Devils were voted number 1 in the AP Top 25 for the 149th time, extending their own record. Number 17 North Carolina had a letdown of sorts after topping Duke, losing now number 28 Miami and NC State in a span of 3 games. The Tar Heels have won 3 straight since, climbing 1 spot in this week's poll following wins over Louisville and Virginia Tech. North Carolina has gone 4-1 since leading scorer and rebounder Caleb Wilson broke his left hand against Miami on February 10th. He's moving in the right direction, Coach Hubert Davis said. He's worked out the day before the game and was just dribbling, shooting, catching like normal. Meanwhile, in Michigan, another heated rivalry will be played on Sunday when number 3 Michigan hosts number 8 Michigan State. The Wolverines won the first meeting 83-71 at Michigan State on January 30th behind Yaxel Landenberg's 26 points and 12 rebounds. Michigan wrapped up the Big Ten regular season title with its 84-70 win over number 11 Illinois on Friday, but lost backup guard L.J. Carson for the season with a torn ACL. And in Tennessee, number 24 Vanderbilt and number 23 Tennessee play the only other game between ranked teams Saturday in Knoxville. The Commodores made the NCAA tournament for the first time in 8 years in their first season under coach Mark Bennington. Opened the season with 16 straight wins. It's been more of a struggle since SEC play started. Vanderbilt has lost 3 of its last 4 games, most recently to Kentucky, and is 9-7 in conference games heading into Tuesday's matchup at Ole Miss.
Thank you, Larry. You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time is 10:32. On to Asking Eric. Cheating ex-wife returns to ask for second chance. Dear Eric, I was married for several years to a woman who, unbeknownst to me, cheated. Frankly, we probably shouldn't have been married in the first place. I divorced her. After a number of months, she called me out of the blue and wanted to come over. She admitted to cheating and said it was over with the married man and asked for forgiveness. However, I question her commitment as she wants to keep her apartment. Do I forgive and take her back? I have no trouble getting dates, or just move on. There is a possibility of a job in a new city that is appealing to me. From either this or that. Dear either, to quote the song from the musical Sunday in the Park with George, move on. The biggest clue for me is in your second sentence. You wrote, frankly, we probably shouldn't have been married in the first place. If that's how you feel, there's no need to make the same mistake twice. Infidelity is not always unforgivable, nor is it something that can't be worked through. But what I don't see in your letter is a strong reason why it may be different this time. It doesn't bode well that her most recent ex is apparently still married. When getting back with an ex, it's healthy to be able to acknowledge what didn't work before and be able to communicate clearly about how you're going to change things for better outcomes in the future. It doesn't sound like that's happening. It's fine to leave the past in the past. Dear Eric, I lost my hearing in one ear, and my nephew, who's an audiologist, suggested a cochlear device that might help get some of my hearing back. It was a successful surgery. Now I wear my hair a little longer than I would normally to try to cover it. The device helps me be able to hear along with a hearing aid in my other ear. The issue I have is adults I don't know coming up to me and bluntly asking, "What is that?" I don't mind explaining what a cochlear device is, but I was brought up not to point out people with visible differences or disabilities, etc. I just wish people who think it's okay to ask a stranger, "What is that?" would stop and think, "Is that kind? Or will my asking make the person feel better? Or do I really need to ask this?" I wanted to say, "Why would you ask me that?" to the last person who asked me at a funeral. I wasn't there to be a poster person for cochlear devices. How do I say politely, "None of your business"? From Please Don't Ask. Dear Please, you're right. You don't have to be a spokesperson for cochlear devices or anything else that's going on with your body or happening in your life. People sometimes forget or ignore the fact that one person's curiosity doesn't demand another person's response. With regard to politeness, you don't need to bend over backward to preserve a stranger's feelings or even a friend's. The next time you're asked about something related to your appearance or your abilities, it's fine to say, "I'd rather not talk about it," and leave it at that. Dear Eric, I was reading a column of yours where a senior couple was asking about downsizing and contributing the many articles, art, antiques, furnishings, etc. they have collected over the years in their home. I actually work with some companies that do exactly that. Our profession is called Senior Move Managers, and there is now actually an association called National Association of Senior Move Managers. I am a retired nurse who loves working with seniors, and I am always a little surprised when I tell people what I do, part-time, that they've never heard of the service. Believe me, I will definitely be using such a service myself in the not-too-distant future. Moving is always difficult, especially so for seniors. It really becomes overwhelming with all of the decisions to be made and what to do with all their belongings. Many managers can pre-sort, give, or ship items to family members, use donation centers, help lay out a floor plan for the new residents, pack them and unpack them. I just wanted to give you that information because I think it is a very much needed service, especially for seniors. From Senior Move Manager. Dear Manager, thanks for sharing this resource. Personally, I've had wonderful experiences with Senior Move Managers, and I often get letters from children struggling to help their parents downsize and other seniors facing life transitions. I think a lot of readers will appreciate knowing about this possibility, whether for themselves or for a loved one. Larry?
Thank you, Linda. The following is analysis, and it is printed on the front page of the Buffalo News today. Again, analysis article. Dems' newfound unity being tested as U.S. strikes Iran. Washington. For Democrats demoralized at being shut out of power in Washington, the past several months have offered reason for optimism. A party often beset by ideological division has largely been unified in opposition to President Trump's hardline immigration tactics, particularly after 2 U.S. citizens were killed in Minneapolis. Heading into a midterm election year in which they are just a few seats shy of reclaiming the U.S. House majority. Democrats have also kept the White House on defense with criticism of Trump's economic policies and ties to Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sex offender. But the U.S. and Israel strikes against Iran could test the durability of that cohesion. Initially, Democrats balanced condemnation of Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who was killed over the weekend, with calls for Congress to quickly pass a war powers resolution that would restrain Trump's attack options. As soon as our resolution comes to the floor, senators need to pick a side, Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer said on Monday. Stand with Americans who don't want war, or stand with Donald Trump as he single-handedly starts another war. But some divisions are surfacing as a handful of Democrats, especially those who are strongly aligned with Israel, expressed reservations about the war powers measure. Representative Greg Landsman, Democrat Ohio, won't back an Iran resolution. Before the strike, Representative Josh Gottheimer, Democrat New Jersey, also said he would vote no. Senator John Fetterman, Democrat Pennsylvania, who backed a war powers vote tied to Venezuela in January, also has broken with Democrats over the Iranian measure and rejected arguments that the attack was illegal, spurring frustration among party leaders. John Fetterman knows better, House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries said on CNN. Republicans are also facing internal dissent. Trump, who did little to prepare Americans for the prospect of such a dramatic conflict, said the operation could last 4 to 5 weeks. He hasn't articulated a clear exit strategy and warns that American casualties could mount, which will pose a severe test of voter patience for the conflict. The war could also lead to rising gas prices and economic volatility that may bolster Democratic arguments that the president is out of touch with the financial realities facing many Americans. Still, Republicans see an opportunity to portray Democrats as reflexively opposed to Trump. For my Democratic colleagues, this is not about what's best for our national security or what's best for protecting the American people, said Senator John Kennedy, Republican of Louisiana. This is about how to defeat Donald Trump. Democrats have undergone a searing internal debate over the party's relationship with Israel in the wake of the war in Gaza. Then President Joe Biden's loyalty to Israel during the heat of the 2024 campaign was starkly at odds with younger generations outraged by the treatment of Palestinians in Gaza. By the time Kamala Harris rose to the top of the ticket last year, she struggled to win over some younger voters who are critical of Democratic success. Critical to Democratic success. Paco Fabian, the political director for the progressive advocacy group Our Revolution, acknowledged that Democrats aren't monolithic, but he also suggested a shift was underway, noting the results of a New Jersey special election last month. During that campaign, the affiliated super PAC of the pro-Israeli American Israeli Public Affairs Committee sought to thwart the moderate candidate Tom Malinowski after he questioned unconditional aid to the Israeli government. Those efforts appeared to backfire, with the more progressive contender, Analiya Maya, winning the primary. Given what's going on right now, I don't think the moment is doing AIPAC and Israel any favors, Fabian said. Sympathy toward Israel appears to be shifting. 3 years ago, 54% of Americans sympathized more with the Israelis, compared with 31% for the Palestinians, according to a Gallup polling released last month. Now their support is about evenly balanced, with 41% saying their sympathies lie more with the Palestinians and only 36% saying the same about the Israelis. Americans' initial reactions to airstrikes also appeared more negative than positive. Early polling suggested about 6 in 10 U.S. adults disapproved of the U.S. decision to take military action in Iran, according to a CNN poll conducted via text message over the weekend. A separate Snap poll from the Washington Post conducted via text message on Sunday suggested that about half of those polled opposed the strikes, while 39% were in support. Roughly 1 in 10 were unsure. Democrats and independents drove much of the disapproval in those early polls, while Republicans were much more supportive. The initial political impact of the attacks on Iran could emerge as soon as Wednesday as the results of the first primary elections of this year's midterm campaign are revealed. In North Carolina, Durham County Commissioner Nada Alam was already getting into her bid to unseat two-term Representative Valerie Fuseev with backing from Our Revolution and other top progressives. After receiving support from groups tied to the AIPAC during her 22 campaign. Wushi's campaign rejected such contributions this cycle. Over the weekend, she said she doesn't support Trump's illegal war with Iran and would back the war powers resolution. Still, Alam would be the first Muslim elected to Congress from North Carolina, was quick to release video ahead of Sunday's vote criticizing Trump for starting another endless war and promising to never accept support from the pro-Israeli lobby. In Texas, home to high-profile Senate primaries on Tuesday, Democratic voters expressed alarm at the attacks. It shouldn't have happened, said Charles Padmore, 45, an independent contractor in Houston. Affordability should be the top priority on Trump's list. Alex Diaz, 31, a biology high school teacher in Houston, called the bombing of Iran uncalled for. You're trying to start World War III, and we don't need that right now, he said. The fallout could start to spread to other contests this month, ahead of the March 17th primary in Illinois. AIPAC-aligned groups have also criticized Daniel Biss, the Evanston mayor, who is aiming to become the Democratic candidate to succeed the retiring Representative Jan Schakowsky, In an interview, Biss spoke of the backlash I'm hearing people have against AIPAC and their MAGA-aligned money and their Trump-aligned policy agenda. Asked about such predictions, Patrick Dorton, a spokesman for AIPAC's affiliated Super PAC, said, "The key distinction will be between those who recognize that Iran is a murderous regime that tortures women for leaving their hair uncovered, hangs gay people, and executes peaceful democratic protesters, and those who will turn a blind eye to the regime's atrocities." As Congress moves toward a potential war powers vote this week, Biss said there was a need for Democrats to act as a strong, clear, vocal, united opposition party. I also would like to see the Democratic Party not just on the procedural argument, but on the background or the basic acknowledgement that this war is wrong, he added. On Capitol Hill, Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, a Democrat on the Armed Services Committee, said he was less concerned about party unity than the prospect of achieving bipartisan vote on the war powers resolution. 3 Republicans ultimately backed the Venezuela resolution in January. "What I want to see happen is the war powers resolution pass," he said. "I'm not focused on what Democrats as a whole do. We're going to have differing opinions among Democrats and among Republicans." Linda?
Thank you, Larry. Trump contradicts Rubio, says he forced Israel into Iran war. President Trump on Tuesday offered a much different explanation on how the United States and Israel opted to launch a surprise war with Iran, contending he pushed Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu into the conflict. The U.S. Commander-in-Chief offered a brief update on the war's status, telling reporters in the Oval Office that the American-Israeli side has been doing very well. They have no air detection, that's been knocked out, Trump said of the Iranian government and military. Their radar has been knocked out, and just about everything's been knocked out, so we'll see how we do. Amid reports of depleted U.S. weapons stockpiles, Trump claimed that we have a tremendous amount of munitions, ammunition at the upper level, middle, and upper levels, all of which is really powerful stuff. As many Democratic lawmakers have criticized Trump's decision to launch a weeks-long bombardment of the Islamic Republic and questioned whether he has a long-term plan with Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei dead, Trump's Tuesday visitor in the gold-plated office, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, has struck a more measured tone. While Democrats have invoked the ghosts of troubled U.S. operations like those in Iraq and Afghanistan, Merz reportedly on Sunday called such comparisons only partially valid. He also has said because of Germany's support for Ukraine, his government was in no position to come to Washington lecturing our partners on their military strikes against Iran. On Tuesday, Merz did not criticize the American leader's decision to go to war. Instead, he told reporters they would be talking about the day after the conflict ends. To be sure, Trump could use some political cover. There was no immediate threat to the United States of America by the Iranians. Senate Intelligence Vice Chairman Mark Warner, Democrat of Virginia, told reporters Monday evening, "There was a threat to Israel, but if we equate a threat to Israel as the equivalent as an imminent threat to the United States, then we are in uncharted territory. We have seen the goals for this operation change, I believe, 4 or 5 times. Americans, too, have reluctance. 59% of respondents to a CNN poll conducted Saturday and Sunday disapproved of the strikes, with 41% approving." Here are 3 takeaways from Trump and Merz in the Oval Office. Forced their hand. Trump contradicted his Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, former GOP Senator Marco Rubio, by contending he likely forced Israel into launching the conflict. "No, I might have forced their hand. You see, we were having negotiations with these lunatics, and it was my opinion that they were going to attack first. They were going to attack," Trump told reporters. "I felt strongly about that, and based on the way the negotiation was going, I think that they were going to attack first, and I didn't want that to happen," he added. "So if anything, I might have forced Israel's hand. But Israel was ready, and we were ready, and we've had a very, very powerful impact, because virtually everything they have has been knocked out." But on Monday afternoon, before briefing House and Senate lawmakers, Rubio suggested the opposite scenario led Trump to decide to attack. It was abundantly clear that if Iran came under attack by anyone, the United States or Israel or anyone, they were going to respond and respond against the United States, Rubio told reporters at the Capitol. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces, and we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties. Rubio was seated on a sofa a few feet from Trump on Tuesday. He did not attempt to clarify his remarks on how the war started. Not going to know anybody. In a remarkable admission, Trump said the U.S.-Israeli strikes very well could kill every single potential new Iranian leader whom administration officials had been talking with about taking over. Well, most of the people we had in mind are dead, so we had some in mind from that group that is dead, he said on Saturday airstrikes that killed. He said of Saturday airstrikes that have killed the supreme leader and a large group of other Iranian officials. And now we have another group. They may be dead also, based on reports. So I guess you have a third wave coming in pretty soon, Trump said of a promised massive round of airstrikes to come. We're not going to know anybody. The leader of the pack is gone. That would seem to put an operation's long-term goal of a more stable Islamic Republic at risk. Trump even mentioned the beginning of the 2003 Iraq conflict when the George W. Bush administration opted against propping up a surviving member of Saddam Hussein's government. If you look at Iraq, where very stupidly everybody was fired, the generals were fired, the military was fired, the police were fired, the fire departments were fired, and all the government employees were fired, he said. So after, by the way, ISIS was born, that's where ISIS came from. In another stunning moment of candor, Trump admitted about the next Iranian leader, we haven't been thinking too much about that. It would seem to me that somebody from within maybe would be more appropriate, he said, but it would seem to me that somebody that's there currently popular, if there's such a person. But we have people like that. He did not name names, nor say what any of what he called more moderate candidates were even still alive. Back in the Oval, when the day's press pool crossed the threshold to the Oval Office, it broke a trend of the White House this year by keeping visits by world leaders behind closed doors. Rowdy Oval Office scenes featuring American and foreign reporters crowded around couches featuring tense aides to Trump and other global leaders were a core part of the first 12 months back in office, but became more rare during recent months. But since Trump returned from a holiday vacation to South Florida, the White House has shifted its strategy. Last month, Israel Prime Minister Netanyahu became the third major world figure to visit the West Wing this year that didn't feature a raucous pool spray in the gold-plated Oval Office. There also was no cacophony of shouted questions or Trump, as he had done earlier in other sessions, taking verbal swipes at reporters and their employers on February 3rd, when Colombian President Gustavo Petro met privately with Trump. Journalists also were kept away on January 15th, when Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado visited. That day's White House guidance email listed the Machado meeting as a working lunch in the president's private West Wing dining room. There are reasons Machado and Petro were kept away from reporters and cameras. Both came to the White House amid disagreements with Trump. Mercer's light tone on the Iran war offered the White House an opportunity, and aides opted to end the trend. We were on the same page of terms of getting this terrible regime in Tehran away, the German chancellor said with a polite smile. He then changed the subject to Washington-Berlin trade talks. Larry?
Thank you, Linda. Minnesota files lawsuit over Medicaid funding. Trump administration plans to freeze money over fraud concerns. Minnesota sued President Donald Trump's administration Monday in an attempt to stop it from withholding $243 million in Medicaid funds, warning it may have to cut health care for low-income families if the money is held back. The lawsuit asked a U.S. court in Minneapolis to issue a temporary restraining order to block the withholding for Medicaid. The move came after Vice President J.D. Vance said last week the administration would temporarily halt some Medicaid funding to Minnesota over fraud concerns. Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison said his office has a strong record of fighting Medicaid fraud and has won more than 300 convictions and $80 million in judgments and restitutions during his time in office. Trump's attempts to look like he's fighting fraud only punish the people and families who most need the high-quality, affordable health care that all Minnesotans deserve, Ellison said in a statement. As long as I am Attorney General, I will do everything in my power to defend our tax dollars both from fraudsters and from the Trump administration's cruelty. And also, we have a short here, New York, from New York State, U.S. District Judge Louis Lindman on Tuesday blocked President Donald Trump's administration's efforts to halt New York's first-in-the-nation congestion fee meant to reduce traffic and pump revenue into the region's aging transit system. Former President Joe Biden initially approved the $9 toll. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Wednesday, March 4th, 2026. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been
Linda Ranella
and Larry Beenan. Thank you for listening, and please continue to stay safe.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability.